Good morning. My name is James Stanger. This is another video in my IVF and risk series. This one is to do with a recent case in America of unauthorized embryo movement. Since vitrification, oocytes and embryos are surviving cryostorage with remarkable predictability. But with each storage event, there is also potential litigation. Clinics need to address the implication of this vast expansion, what I almost call wanton, it might not be the right word, freezing, as a critical risk activity. In fact, it is the primary risk activity. My name is James Stanger, and welcome to FerdAid's IVF Daily channel. So this small video is a verbal recount of an article published inside Reproductive Health, published by fertilitybritish.com. And I'm going to read this article verbatim. It's only a very short one. It's open access. Anyone can read it, so I'm not breaking any copyright. And at the end, I'm going to make a few comments about security, the huge expansion of fertility, and some comments of mine. But let's just go and read what was written in this article, which is always, this is a really great, so I recommend everyone subscribe to this. So this was April 16, 2026, the lawsuit on the Acacia fertility lawsuit, the latest on the Acacia fertility lawsuit. The suit, filed against Acacia Fertility Center in Southern California, claims patients weren't notified of the sudden movement of their embryos 165 miles north to the northwest, which they allege was also performed without proper safeguards in place. So there's two elements here. I'm going to read this article verbatim because it's a lot easier. It's actually very well written, but this is about the lawsuit by Ron Schickman, and it goes like this. A well-known IVF clinic in Orange County, California, purportedly moved all its patient embryos late last year to a new locality more than 100 miles away without appropriate safeguards or notifying patients. This is one of many allegations made in a lawsuit filed in early March against Acacia Fertility Center in Laguna, California, the MD Brian Acacio, and, interestingly enough, the embryologist John Sakadris. So not only is the clinic being sued, but also the managing director, medical director, and the senior embryologist. Note that. According to the lawsuit brought by 52 patients and their partners in Orange County Supreme Court in March 3, their specimens were moved last December 17 to a satellite office operated by Acacia Fertility in Bakersfield, California, 160 miles to the northwest. This was done after the clinic had not paid rent on the Laguna New World facility for a year and was facing sudden eviction. So you have a clinic which is about to be closed down. Crisis. The practice website states the practice has moved permanently to Bakersfield. A lawsuit filed last December against Acacia Fertility by the owners of the physical property, Mission Medical Investors, claimed rent had not been paid by the clinic between December 24 and 25. As a result, back rent of more than $250,000 was owed, the court record showed. The patient's lawsuit alleges this physical disorder stemmed from Acacia's issues with substance abuse. The California Medical Board ordered Acacia to stop practicing medicine according to public records. An interim order issued last October had placed some restriction on his ability to practice after the board had begun an investigation into allegation Acacia had been abusing drugs. Those events prompted the swift movement of embryos to Bakersfield, according to a lawsuit filed by the patients. Plaintiffs are informed and believe the embryos were transported internally by clinic personnel without independent third-party oversight, according to the lawsuit. Now, what happens is an independent person making a comment. Eva Schenkman, an embryology lab director and consultant based in Rocky Mountain, I assume that's North Carolina, observed that transporting cryopreserved specimens carry inherent risks and must be handled with extreme care. Were these tanks locked during transport? Were they tied down? What was done to minimize vibration? Were they transported in liquid or in vapor? Schenkman asked. Additionally, such transport may fall outside standard liability coverage, raising further concerns about accountability. Schenkman added that firms such as Cryoport and Reprotech are often asked with moving embryos in order to ensure they are properly protected during transport. The move also occurred without advance written notice being sent to the lawsuit states. No telephone calls were made advising patients of an impending transport. No emergency disclosures were issued. No consent forms were circulated beforehand. Patients were not asked for authorization to relocate their embryos to Bakersfield. Patients were not given the opportunity to select an independent accredited third-party cryogenic transport provider. Patients are not given the choice to move their embryos elsewhere. In addition to surreptitiously moving the embryos, the lawsuit accuses Acacio of requiring patients to sign a release if they wanted their move to another practice, which is fair enough. That included a disclaimer that the viability of the tissue was not guaranteed as a result of it being transported. The release required a notary signature in order to be accepted, the lawsuit said. Well, this actually brings into concept that when embryos are moved anywhere, both within the clinic, like in this case from one lab to another, or if a patient or asks their embryos to be transferred from one clinic to another, the, the, the movement has an inherent loss of viability. Overall, this appears to be a high-risk decision made under questionable circumstances with significant implications for both patient trust and specimen safety, Sheckman said. Neither Acacio or Sarcosodris appear to have an attorney, according to court records. They did not respond to requests seeking treatment. Now, there was a paper published just a couple of days ago in the Current Opinion of Obstetrics and Gynecology talking about this business of laboratory safety, and they make the comment, IVF laboratories operate in a biologically constrained environment where strict timing and chain of custody govern patient safety. In the last decade, the field has undergone a seismic operational shift as the transition to the freeze-all model has exponentially increased specimen inventories, altering the risk profile from acute procedural errors to latent infrastructure and data management failures. As frozen embryo transfers increasingly dominate the assisted reproductive technology field and social freezing becomes prevalent, the risk of embryos and gametes concentrates into a long-term perspective. While procedural errors in IVF labs remain rare, that is to put the embryos back, really, really rare, reviews of recent disasters highlight vulnerabilities in cryostorage monitoring, proper witnessing, and data transferring. Modern IVF labs face tail risk scenarios where rare equipment or data failures can affect hundreds of patients. Mitigating these threats requires a shift from relying on human alertness to preventative work resilience. Accreditation standards govern changes, while automated technologies such as weight-based cryostorage monitoring and electronic witnessing protect the identity, viability, and genetic integrity of patient samples. So just very quickly, a few comments. This case highlights the existential risk associated with embryo and oocyte cryopreserved and movement. What happens when a clinic ceases to trade or is bought by another group or makes any movement of stored material? How does a clinic get everyone's consent, given that many clinics lose contact with their patients over time? It's not possible to get consent. This case is scary because there is no way to predict the movement of embryos to storage and to get everyone's consent, and that they needed to get professional expertise to move them. So this is another element, but if you're moving embryos around and you're doing it yourself, you're exposing yourself to a potential cause of concern, whereas if you pay a professional mover to come in, at least you're actually transferring responsibility to them. But it doesn't help you a great deal because, however, how does the clinic reply to a case where the embryos failed to survive warming after they've been moved, where the clinics may blame the move on the loss of viability? So if you move embryos from one clinic to another, they don't survive, they'll say they didn't survive. Whose fault is that? And there is no way that you can actually document that everything was done according except what you've done, but that is no guarantee that the embryos are not viable. How does a clinic reply to a case where oocytes held in storage, say, for 10 years for fertility preservation and fail to survive warming, where the client may blame the move on the loss of viability? That's a person's fertility. Huge lawsuits. Who will be around after 10 or 15 more years to accept responsibility? That's a big print. All the cases where embryos have been transferred normally, that occurred 10, 15, 20 years previously. Those staff are long since gone. I suspect there is no risk management step a clinic could take to allow them to freeze with absolute confidence. One way is to reduce the amount of cryostorage to reduce the risk. Another is to require clients to get legal advice regarding cryostorage before treatment. That is, you just don't get them to sign a consent form as part of like an IVF cycle. They actually should get legal advice, because this is where the lawsuit's going to come from. Ask clients to sign a waiver that the clinic is not responsible for maintaining contact, and ask the clients to pay all storage fees up front, and these can be reimbursed after warning. Now, it's interesting, I've argued this for quite a few years now, and no one seems particularly interested. Everyone says you can't do that. But my argument is, because you lose contact with patients, and you're always trying to get money from them to storage, if they don't pay the storage fee, you're not going to throw them out without running risk litigation. If I get it, better to get someone to sign a consent form before you freeze, saying we'll store these embryos for, say, 10 years or 5 years or whatever, and at that time they will be discarded. You ask the patient to pay the whole storage fee up front. They can walk away, have nothing to do with the embryos anymore, knowing full well that at the end of the term they'll be discarded, but they should still be there if they came back. If they come back and use them later, that money is reimbursed. And I don't know why clinics don't do this more often, because that overcomes this problem of having to get contact every quarter, every whatever. Both clinics and clients need to both recognise that cryostorage of gametes and embryos carries considerable risk, and that errors will occur because of the nature of cryostorage. These dewars are huge and the straws are minute. You can't see the embryo, and there's no way that you can guarantee absolutely that everything's going to go according to plan. But I think it's naive for clients to not accept that there is an existential risk, and that they in signing the form, they recognise that maybe 1 in a million errors will occur. But they should recognise that cryostorage of gametes and embryos carries considerable risk, and that errors may occur, and that vitrification of embryos is both remarkable and fragile. Hopefully clients will accept that clients work extremely hard to ensure these risks are rare, but clients need to be able to demonstrate a very high level of governance to give clients as much confidence as possible, but it also demonstrates to the clients the limitations of the level of care that can be given. To finish up, thank you for listening for this one. My name's James Stanger. I'm an embryologist with my 50 years experience. These videos are my attempt to bridge the gap between information you may need for your fertility treatment and the most recent publication of LP stuff. I'm not a medical person. This information is not medical advice, but it may help you knowing what questions to ask about your treatment with your doctor, and maybe to help in understanding the advice you receive. If you like what I'm doing, press subscribe, press like, go to my Patreon page or fund me, whatever you want. Just leave a comment and press like, but more importantly, tell your friends about this and then engage in a conversation. This YouTube channel is partially funded by my online EQA program at fertaid.com, which is an online program in andrology and embryology. And if this is my last slide, I'd like to thank you for listening. I know IVF is a personal journey that involves the actions of many different techniques, ideas, events, and staff. It helps to understand as many aspects of that journey as possible, and I hope this information be of value. Tell everyone how good this is, and we'll see you for another video shortly.